Hello, I'm Sora Lexon, and this is Magic Lesson number 59. Sometimes not helping is very helpful. Last week, the online shop closed down for one day for some necessary inventory maintenance. If you happen to be one of the people who noticed that and messaged over to me, that was the reason. And as you can see, no more than 22 hours later, the shop was opened back up online to the public, so no worries there. Thank you for the messages you sent. It's good to know that if something ever does go wrong or hinky in the online shop's operations, that there are individuals who will give me a heads up about it, and that is super helpful. This wasn't actually something going wrong. This was planned and it didn't last very long. But still, thank you for the messages. On to today's little magic lesson, the lesson of not being helpful, which does sound counterintuitive at first, like most of the lessons, but it isn't really. And no, I'm not talking about going around and refusing to open doors for people like that. Although, to play devil's advocate with an overused example like that example, another perspective of that same experience from the opposing pole, could reveal to you wisdom in not opening doors for people. Because having to open it for themselves gives them the opportunity to use their muscles and hone commonplace daily dexterities. See? Two sides on even the seemingly simplest coin. Should I open a door for someone or should I not? Yes, in many instances it's helpful, but in some instances you're actually not helping them by doing that. And one way to open a door for another is a passing kindness, right? And that's going to very much brighten their day. It's this optimistic thing you've done, which will most of the time, majority of the time, pay itself forward as they respond in kind to another. But in another way, it could be a theft. When you do that, you could be stealing from them their right to open the door for themselves. Who knows? Perhaps they wanted to. Perhaps their body would prefer the practice. Perhaps they were going to use that moment's hesitation to take a beat. And when it comes to bigger, more metaphoric thresholds, truth seekers, the initiated will know what I'm referencing here. Opening a door for someone else rather than allowing them to choose to do so for themselves, that really can be an occult crime of the highest order. So, a lot of different ways of looking at even that simple example. To get back to the point, sometimes helping people isn't always helpful, and not being helpful isn't always mean-spirited or even intended as a negation influence. Sometimes not being helpful is intended by the practitioner of that skill to be the most helpful thing they can do for another. And this is where almost everyone with a lack or victim role mindset lets out a groan, right? All those with the conditioned expectation that others do things for them, that's the easiest way to get by, that it's the smoothest and simplest way to get things done. As if somehow by merit of existing, they have an entitled right to make more energy or take more energy out of a system than they give into it, or to be provided with energy by a system that they don't return in equal measure. And as you ought to know by now, if you've been listening to these little podcasts, magic doesn't work like that. Nothing really works like that. What you put into an aggregate is what you can draw from it. The emotional energy you cast in ritual is the means by which the Magi initiates active force. The repetition of a ritual, that habit-forming behavior, that gains its strength. Just like a muscle gets bigger the more often you lift that weight. The more focus you put onto a project, the more fruition that project will derive. The more time you spend on any relationship, feeding it with intention, will, energy, whether it's romantic, physical, a business relationship, spiritual, whatever, the more energy you give it, the more opportunity that bond is then given to return those forces back unto you, one way or another. Granted, sometimes that means in the sudden dissolution of that relationship, whatever it may be, because you were paying enough attention, putting enough intention and will there to realize that it needed to be moved on from quickly because it wasn't working well or wasn't going to, so that another better influence may take its place. You get the idea. In all energetic circuits, there's a give and take. It's a circle, a holism. Magic displays this effect to us, right, practitioners, adepts, on the daily. In all of our practices, we see this law, this rule displayed, whether in mindfulness, ritual, or actualized spell casting returns. So thinking or acting from within the victim role mentality or victim of circumstance mindset, or how else would you define this? Illusory predisposition of entitlement to absolutely anything. It doesn't work because, believe it or not, you aren't even entitled to your next breath. You aren't. You aren't entitled to the next breath you take. You might not take it. It might not be there. Happens to people all the time. Will eventually happen to you too. Nothing to be afraid of there, right? Friends, it's just a fact. You don't have a right to any of this. It's temporal, fleeting, and all the more beautifully amazing and worthy of adoration because of that. But still, it isn't yours. The next breath you take isn't yours yet. You haven't taken it yet. So if you think it will always be there, or should be there, or you have an expectation for it to be there, that's a conditioned response, a program. Or you think someone or something else owes it to you. You're just wrong. And groaning or sighing about it, when I tell you that you're wrong, it isn't the universe's job to give you that next inhale. Complaining about that isn't going to change it, right? It won't change anything any more than groaning or sighing when I say it isn't anyone's job to be helpful to you will change that. Do you like it? No. Do you have to like it? No. But is your whining about it going to change it? Absolutely not. How many people do we know in our lives that are like this, right? How many times did we ourselves resort, lapse into, or fall prey to this kind of programming in ourselves, this victim mindset, the heavily polarized emotional and mental conditioning of, if someone doesn't help me so that I can do something for myself, they're just being mean, right? We've all done it. We've all fallen into that hole. We all know people who function from this place. Some people never evolve beyond it, never get out of that leg of their journey within our lifetimes that we can see. So I'm sure everyone gets what I'm talking about here when I'm discussing this. Our own limiting, conditioned beliefs and habits are what hold us back a majority of the time. Everyone who has had an influence growing up has had this, an influence while being in childhood that taught them something that is going to have a limiting effect on their life at some point. Not all of the beliefs that we're conditioned with, programmed with, not all those limiting beliefs are bad beliefs, right? We talk about good and bad a lot in the occult and how they really aren't either, right? So being taught as a 5-year-old that you can't fly like Superman will keep your physical mammalian body alive when you decide not to run around and jump off of tall things like buildings or bridges, for instance. That's a limiting belief, but it's a good limiting belief in a sense, right? It's something adults downloaded into you as a reality system. You took it up and it worked well and it's kept you alive, which is why you keep it in place. But a lot of limiting beliefs that were given to you at some time or another weren't good. And they will limit you. And you have not looked at them or addressed them to see whether or not they're helpful or whether or not they're hindering you. Right? Ideas like only people born wealthy can ever become rich. Only 1 in a million becomes a famous rock star, so don't bother trying to become a musician. It's unrealistic or irresponsible. Those are limiting beliefs. Can you imagine if Mozart or Beethoven had listened to that kind of garbage fed to them by some, supposedly well-meaning adult that didn't know any better than to say something that ignorant, right? No, Johannes. Nein, kein music, right? It will never pay the bills. Right? Could you imagine? We are all offered limiting beliefs at some point. And when we are children, pulling everything in like wondrous, amazing little sponges, lusting for systems to create pattern recognition behaviors and personality grooves from, which become ingrained habits, we always take some beliefs in. The ones that don't serve us well in life, those are the ones, as mature adults, we are then responsible for finding and dissolving within ourselves. That's our job. That's no one else's job but ours. It's part of the process. You want to become the best version of yourself. That is what magic is. You have to clean the rusted, old, unwanted anchors out of your mind closet. You have to make room for a nice sunlight ceiling window in there instead. Part of the occultist's tasking, of any initiate's tasking while wandering around in Malkuth, is to take back control of the programming that's running you. That's job number 1 before you can do anything else, right? It's not exactly the most unique or exotic job to have to do, but it's necessary and it's very authentic. Claiming to be a victim of circumstance or refusing to recognize your own limiting belief systems, always asking other people for help, not understanding, comprehending, or appreciating when they don't, refusing to acknowledge that you're playing the victim role or blaming other people for things you feel like you can't have, can't get, or they won't give you, other things that you're blaming for why things are always so bad. That won't ever change it. So real or not, right? Will it ever help anything? No, start there. It won't change anything to think that way. Getting mad at people, judging them or pointing the finger at them because they won't help you, especially if or when you feel you deserve help, that isn't ever going to stop someone who doesn't want to help you from saying no. It isn't. And even more, sometimes when someone's saying, no, I won't help you, it's because they are a nice person and trying to do the best thing for you, and you just can't see it. Or at the very least, they're trying to be neutral and not trying to do something good or bad for you, removing themselves from the control influence you're demanding that they take within your life or your experiences. Now, this isn't always true, right? Not always, granted. Lots of people just don't have the space, the resource, the gratitude, the internal balance to help others, and they're just being ick at this point in their eternal walk when they say no. There's a lot of that, but sometimes it really is someone's way of being nice or doing the best, most ethical thing they could ever do for you. They're giving you the greatest gift they can when they won't help you. So that, yes, you can have the opportunity to learn to help yourself, or to at least be involved in your own process of choices. Give a man a fish he eats for a day, right? We've all heard this one. Refuse him a fish and give him the opportunity to learn to labor with a net, and he's going to eat for a lifetime. Same principle. And I can say from personal experience, both in abiding by this incredible guideline of mentorship when I'm using it with others, and also by being met with it, confronted by it, by my own mentors. If it's an initiate behaving this way, saying, nope, no friend, I won't help, it's for all the right reasons, because it is the Magi's purpose not to depend on exterior forces. The winds which are buffeting and blowing the untrained about, right? We don't want that for ourselves. We don't want to be bruised by that. It's the Magi's purpose to have control, self-control, control of their existence, their reality, their choices, their influences. It is in order to progress that the magician seeks to take control, or witch, warlock, whatever, control over his or her own life, his or her own remarkable programming, his or her own, triumphant reality, both internal and external state reality. As above, so below. As within, so without. Right? After all, individuals without control over their own life, which can feel compelling in the moment, maybe because it seems simpler or it's the lazy way out, and which they're validating and generating with a victim mentality, they're actually not winning, right? They're not making it. They don't have it made. They simply lack control and can't progress. In order to be successful, to harness the power of self, right? The great secret, that rare intuition of magic in life, in anything, your career, your marriage, whatever it may be that you're looking to be successful in. You have to get rid of the victim within yourself. That is the single most brilliant, luxe, bright method. Rid yourself of the victim mentality. And yes, it can be a smooth and painless transition if you allow it to be. The student who relies on the master will always be a student. The master knows it is not in helping the student that the most help is given. Okay, this little podcast is getting really long today, so I'm going to make this a two-parter and pick it up again next week in Let's Learn to Say Thank You to People Who Refuse to Help Us, right? Part 2 video. There's a seemingly insane sentence only a too often misunderstood adept or occultist would say. Why on earth would we thank people who refuse to help us? Well, you should. It reminds me of Lewis Carroll, actually, right? If you want to stay in place, you have to run as fast as you can. If you want to get somewhere, you have to run twice as fast. We're all mad here, Alice. And to some of us, it makes perfect sense. Which is why we tend to be so hush-hush in public in general. It's why we don't talk, right? We only talk to each other about these things. Until next time.